All right, so welcome to my keynote. All right, apologies for that. I've been a Rails programmer for too long, and I used Scaffold to generate this presentation. And I kind of kept this towards the end. I'll fix it in the end, and I forgot. So yeah, I'm really sorry about that. But anyway, so my name is Pratik Dayal. Unlike Chad, I do need an introduction, so I'll introduce myself as I go along. So yeah, I'm currently the CEO of SupportBee, and I started working with Ruby in 2007 when I co-founded Musiboo. And Musiboo is a music sharing website, and we had this idea that how cool it would be if people had a place like Flickr for music where they would go and upload music and discuss it, not just share it with their friends. And we launched Musiboo. We worked on it for a few years. We grew it to about about 500,000 users, few 100,000 uploads. And as I said, I started working on this in 2007, and it was a great time. It just felt like heaven. So I did electronics engineering in my college days, and this was my first real programming project. And unlike the unfortunate people like you, I never did any PHP or Java. So I came into the programming world straight into Ruby, and it was so awesome. And I could sit and code all day, and that was the part that appealed to me the most about doing a startup. Actually, we didn't even call it a startup back then. So we just did something. And I was sitting and coding all day, and the community was still there, actually, surprisingly, even in 2007 in India. We didn't have a Ruby meetup, but we had open coffee clubs, and we had some startup meetups, and actually all people would talk in that is programming pretty much, or the bar camps. So I remember meeting Sidhu, and I remember meeting a few other people. Later I met Hemant, and we would sit and chat about Ruby, and they would give me all these cool ideas. Like I would be like, hey dude, how do I deploy? And they would tell me, there's this cool thing called Mongrel, you should look at it. And I would go back and check out Mongrel, and I would deploy. So it was a really fun time. I was having a great time, but as you would guess, it didn't last. It wasn't as bright and sunny anymore eventually, because I had to start worrying about making money. And I was just a couple of years out of college, not much cash, so I had to really start worrying about, okay, how am I going to make money? This is all fun, but let's get serious about this startup thing now. And I had never done a business, and so I did what any sensible programmer would do, right? I went to a business guy, or I went to a few business people to get their advice. And all the advice that I got was about SEO, about partnerships. People told us, you're a music company, you should go partner with the music labels, you should hire a few salespeople, sell music listings. Like, I don't know if you guys remember, but in 2007, India was sort of moving from the offline world into the online world, and the models were just sort of being adapted to the online models. And everybody was sort of like, everything was a listing site essentially. And you could just put ads on it. So I didn't like this, obviously. I hated doing this work because I love doing programming. But I still persisted with it. I still persisted with it for a few years, and so I did some SEO. I tried doing some sales. It didn't work. And I really felt like this guy. I felt like I had all these superpowers like meta programming and all the cool stuff that Ruby had to offer, but I would just sit and tweak page titles all day long to get my search rankings up. Yeah, it felt really bad. And I really felt disillusioned. I felt very disillusioned with startups because I said, this is not what startups should be about, right? I should be able to do what I enjoy doing. And that's when I started asking myself, can I leverage my strengths as a developer to build a great business? Can I do what I enjoy doing already and somehow build a great business and build a company that I'm really proud of? And I started sort of looking around to get ideas. And that's what my talk is about. So my talk is about coding your business. And I just want to share some experiences I've had, some learnings I've had, some ideas we are even now working on, and just get your thoughts. Maybe it would be nice if you guys could tell me like what do you think, or if you've tried something similar, or even if later you try something, just tweet to me. It would be cool. So when I was doing Musiboo, about a year into Musiboo, SoundCloud launched, and they launched in a public beta or something, and they had a nice product. And they started getting some traction. But other than working on the core product, one thing I noticed was that they had this thing called the API. And somehow people were slowly starting to use that API, and people started writing apps on top of their API. And if you go to their app listing now, they've got dozens of apps. And they have apps which help them get new musicians on board. So these are apps which will allow people to upload directly from, let's say, a music recording program. Or these are apps that get some new listeners. So people have used their API to build charts, or hip-hop charts, specific charts. So I think their API really, really helped them grow their user base. And that was a great learning for me. In some ways, it was, it was the hard way that I was learning because they were taking off. But I mean, there was definitely something to learn from them. And then I sort of started looking around, and I realized that API is definitely the new business development. Today, if you want to grow a product, APIs are a great way to do that. And in fact, if you look at a lot of other products, so GitHub, Twitter, Facebook, Google, there are so many examples that wouldn't be the same product if they didn't have the API ecosystem. And especially most in the last few years, a lot of products are actually just APIs. A lot of products around us are simply APIs. So for example, Firebase. I should use a clicker probably. Sorry. So Firebase is a tool that gives you a backend for mobile or web apps, Swift type for search, Mailgun for delivering emails. Plivo from the streets of Bangalore is competing with Twilio head-on, and they both provide APIs for telephony. So there are a lot of products which are simply APIs. And I think as developers, we are really, really well suited to do these kind of startups. We already understand our target audience. We are the target audience. All of us have been to hackathons. We've worked with different APIs. We know what it feels like when the documentation is shitty, what makes good code examples, what kind of libraries do you need to kickstart the environment. We really understand this stuff really well already. And I think if you were to start a company like this, you are definitely at an advantage. And so you can build a product, and you can get maybe some users, but what about marketing? That's typically the question that I get asked most often from programmers. Like, how do you market your product? How do you get customers? And there are several ways to market your product. Most of them don't work and are frustrating, actually, to execute on. And what I've personally, at least for us and our company, I've realized that writing has turned out to be the best form of marketing, actually. And what I mean by that is, if you look at developer docs or marketing copy of your site or newsletters or even delivering great customer support, it all boils down to being good at writing. And I mean, that's just how it is. For example, this is Mailgun's documentation. If you go through it, it talks about setting up SPF records, how to get your deliverability high, why do you need dedicated IPs. It's stuff that all of us already understand and can write. We just need to be really good at communicating this to our customers. So we already understand this stuff. We just need to get better at being able to communicate it in writing. The same way, if you look at Firebase's landing page, any of us could sit down and write this. We could build this and we could write this. And you just need to be good at writing again. So fortunately, there is good news. Right? I mean, as developers, I think it's very easy to improve at writing. And I'm just going to show you a few examples of how to do that. So GitHub. I think one of the coolest things that GitHub does is that every time you create a new repository, it says add a README file. And that's a great starting point to start learning how to write or communicate our ideas. How many of you guys have open source projects, even or just some bit of code online? And have you written a README for it? Oh, so quite a few of you have, and quite a few have not. Cool. One hand stood up very long, actually. So I was like, wow, yeah. So if you haven't, just go back and write a README for that. And if you already have a README, try to improve it, get maybe more feedback. It's a great starting point to start writing and learning how to write. The other cool thing, at least in today's world, is that product development involves a lot of writing. And this obviously depends on company to company, but you can become a company like this, or you could choose to work for a company like this. So for example, I'll give you an example from SupportBee. So most of our feature requests or enhancement requests typically originate in our support desk. So some customer, for example, in this case, somebody emailed saying, can we have search work over trash tickets? And my colleague Avinash, who's here, I asked him, do we support this? And so it turns out you support this in the API, but we don't support it in the front end. And so what we do is we pipe this ticket into, we have a GitHub app for support, we pipe that into GitHub, and we create an issue. And other than using the issue to actually just review code or attach code, what we do is we try to flesh out the feature completely in issues. So we encourage, not only encourage, sort of we enforce everybody to just discuss completely in issues. We don't even encourage face-to-face or voice calls early on. If you're not able to communicate something in issues, then you should probably go to a call. and then also sum it up and then put it back in the issue. What this does is this forces you to try to explain to your peers what you're trying to do, sometimes in terms of code, sometimes in terms of the marketing copy that you think should be there, or the subject line of the email. It forces you to communicate your ideas. And acquiring that skill also helps you in communicating those ideas to your customers. So it's really the same set of skills. And once we know what we want to work on, what we do, we obviously attach code, and then we go through maybe a sprint or two with that code. And then finally, once we are almost getting done, we post screenshots in the same issue of the finished feature. And what that does is, one thing is that it really helps us review faster, so we can know that this feature is done and can be deployed. But more than that, it's also a starting point for writing a blog post about the feature. And we've taken the same GitHub issues process and turned it into, use it for our blog as well. We power our blogs by Jekyll. We create issues for each new feature that we have, or if you want to put out a dev post about how we did the feature. And we use these assets and we write the blog post. And because we are already comfortable with this GitHub issues process, it's very easy to give feedback. So just like code, we can comment inline, we can help people if they're feeling a writer's block, or if they want some feedback. It's very easy to give out feedback and push out this blog post. So we've really tried to make this process work for us, and it has ended in a lot of our developers or people who have worked with us getting better at writing. And in fact, for the first time, even realizing that they enjoy writing. And it's worked really well for us, and I encourage you guys to go and try it out. Because the cool thing about this process is you can start tomorrow. You don't have to wait to start a company to become good at writing. You can do it in your current job. So next time you have a feature release post, go out and propose to do it yourself. Maybe you have a job opening and you're putting up a job on HasGeek. Tell your founders or tell your CEO that you want to write that, and just practice. So there's so many opportunities around us to practice writing in development. If you build a company like this, one of the other cool things that happens is it's very easy to recruit other developers, because developers love hanging out with other developers, right? That's why we are all here today and we'll be here tomorrow. And so there's a very natural fit there. And I've been talking to a few developers in the last couple of months, and I realized that most developers hate these job posts written with the words ninja, or like, how many of you are ninjas here? Oh. No one? What about programming rock stars? No one. So yeah, I mean, people kind of hate that, and if you are a company like this that is developer friendly, it will show through. You won't have to put an effort to look like that. And so it really does help you hire better people. So what I'm saying is that we figured out that in the end, it just boils down to two things: doing great work on the product, on the ecosystem, and then talking about it. I think, especially in India, we're really good at doing great work. I think we have a very incredibly talented set of developers here, but we are not so savvy about talking about it. And it's not as much of a skill thing, I think as much of it's a mindset thing. So it's about doing great work and talking about it. But obviously, I mean, this is not easy. Building a company like this is not going to be easy, because it's all about the team. It's all about hiring the best people that you can. And after you hire them, spending a lot of time helping them get even better and empowering them so they can make decisions on your behalf. And obviously, this is a very hard thing to achieve, and it's very easy to get it wrong. And you have to just keep trying, and it takes a bit longer. So if you are definitely trying to flip a startup soon, don't try this. Don't do this. It will take a while, but I think you'll end up with a much nicer company in the end. And one of the side effects of working like this or creating a company like this is that you can actually work from the beach. Because now everything happens online. Everything happens in tools. Everything is written. Everything is documented. And you become really comfortable. It's like testing, right? Before we started testing, how many of you felt testing is going to slow you down? And how many of you now feel that, oh, I can't write something serious without tests? Yeah, well, the same number of people. Yeah, cool. Yeah, so it's the same thing. It feels like writing is going to slow your product development down. It's going to make decisions longer, but it actually helps you get way more structured. And you'll definitely see that in a few weeks or maybe a few months. And by the way, that is a real picture of us sitting and working from the beach. So that's one not stock image. And what's incredible to me personally is that I was working on Musiboo for about 3 years. About two of those were miserable. I was just banging my head against a wall, and I could have figured this out, and I could have changed my direction, but I didn't. And I literally felt like I was stuck in a Groundhog Day. Seriously. And it's very easy to get stuck in a Groundhog Day. And what you have to do is obviously you have to step back, and then you have to get a better perspective. And I think the thing that prevented me from doing that was that I had no semblance of a work-life balance. Nothing. I was just working all the time. I was under this assumption that if I'm failing, it's only because I'm not working hard enough. How many of you believe that, actually? That if you're not succeeding at something, then you just got to try harder. Yeah, quite a few people, right? And I think which is kind of true, but I think it's not about the number of hours. So definitely having some work-life balance is very important in getting this perspective. And the other thing we've thought a lot about as a company is that there's simply no way we can outwork our competitors. So for example, our competitors are companies like Freshdesk, which have $13 million, 200 people team. Even if like all of us work 2 days in a day, we would still not out-owl them. So it's simply not going to work like that, and technology companies are not built like that. They're built one great team member and one great decision taken at a time. And that happens when you have a fresh perspective and a clear vision. And it's amazing to me that being in the knowledge industry, an industry driven so much by knowledge and by creative energies, how little at least I did, and when I talk to other people, people understand about how our brain itself works. And that's, I think, probably where a lot of these misconceptions come from. So I highly recommend that you guys go take a look at this book called Your Brain at Work. It's a very quick read. It's going to take you a few hours to read. How many of you have read this book? Okay, only 2 people. Cool. And both of them have worked at Support Beat. So yeah, please go ahead and read this book. What this book shows you is how to get more out of your work life, how sometimes just trying harder is not the solution. And it's a very enjoyable read, and it gives you a very nice perspective. Apart from this, I've also lately started using an rescue time. So I did a quick survey before the RubyConf, and I asked people how much they work. And so about 20 people, the last I checked, about 20 people had filled out that survey. And I think 70% of them said they work about 60 hours a week. And I encourage everyone to go back and set up this application. It's free for about a week. And you'll be surprised by the results. You'll be surprised by how much time you just lose in a YouTube video that somebody sent you and you had no idea that you opened and watched for 30 minutes. So your time is definitely finite. So there's no denying that. But it's amazing that with that finite time, how much of it we lose without even knowing. So try to use this application and free up more of your time and enjoy your life as well while you're building the startup. I think that's really the key. So Bangalore. When Prakash invited me to do the keynote, he pushed out a blog post which said, I'm going to bring a unique Indian perspective. And I wasn't sure what's that going to be entirely. But one thing I do feel very passionate about is being in this city, actually. So in the last couple of years, I've traveled a lot. I've been to Chile. I've spent a lot of time in Vietnam and some other Southeast Asian countries. And I've traveled a lot, and I really enjoy living in some of these places. But I always come back to Bangalore, and I really like spending time here simply for one reason. I think this place is full of incredible developers. It's just so amazing. I haven't been to US. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. I haven't been to US, but I've been to some of the other hubs. I've been to Singapore. But seriously, the development activity here is just amazing. People are so passionate. They really like their code. They like trying out new stuff. And in general, if you see our English ability, everything is really good. And I really think that and especially today, if you look around you, there's enough money, there's enough resources, enough accelerators. Some may even say too many accelerators or incubators around us to help you launch companies. And I really hope that in 2014, a lot more such companies get launched from Bangalore. I'm totally rooting for you guys. If I can help you guys in any way or anybody else, I'm totally up for it. Let's build more such amazing companies. So yeah, Happy New Year, and thank you so much. So I wanted to keep the talk a bit short, so you can either use the time for Q&A or reclaim your 15 minutes of life and go back home early. It's your choice.
Questions, anybody?
Regarding the writing of, encouraging your team to start writing, when you started off, how big was your team?
Sorry?
When you started off with Muzibu, how big was your team when you started actually writing in the code and solving the issues?
No, not really. So none of this happened in Muzibu actually, and that's why I kind of moved away from Muzibu. I realized I had gone too long, far too long to like totally change, and the product had taken a lot of fundamental decisions.
One more connecting question. So,
Sure.
when was the point that how many team members were there when you actually started encouraging your team members to start doing this?
Right. So that's interesting. That's a cool question actually, and you have to start doing this when you are just one person actually, and you have to start from day one. So it's funny, but even when I started doing support B, I would actually, I was a sole developer, but I used Pivotal Tracker, and I would try to document everything, and not as much, but still, and because I think that's the biggest challenge in setting any kind of culture, that you have to start really early on. And when you say early on, you have to basically start with yourself. So the best time to start is when you're starting the company. And some companies have done a good job of explaining this. So recently, we've been reading the Valve handbook. I don't know how many of you guys know about it, but there's a company called Valve, which makes a lot of cool games like Counter-Strike, I believe, right? Sorry, I'm not a gamer, so. Yeah, and so Valve has a good handbook, and that's what they say. To build a company like this, you need a very strong commitment from day one. And one of the things I didn't mention is that one reason we can do this, and a lot of companies can do this and take longer to build better companies, is the fact that they don't take any investment. So you might have to worry about that as well sometimes.
Hey, Pratik, something that always fascinates me with entrepreneurs who have started a product, moved to a different product is, at what time did you decide that, okay, this product sucks, or this is not gonna work, I need to move on? When do you take that decision? It could be a lot of factors, finance, team, motivation.
Right,
What
right.
was your move?
Right. So I definitely had a moment where I clearly knew I had to move on, and so for a while, obviously, I thought that I should keep trying, and I talked to a few more entrepreneurs, and so we had a lot of traction. We had about 1 million visits at one point, and we did have a good amount of traction. But the thing that frustrated me the most was that over the 3 years that I did Muzibu, I had learned a lot of new stuff, not just in terms of programming, in terms of how to go about product design and things like that. And in case of Muzibu, it had already become too big to sort of start over or to completely change, especially we didn't have a big team as well, so it was just me and my co-founder, and I was pretty much the only programmer anyway. So it just felt like with the new experiences that we have and the new knowledge that we have, it just makes more sense to start something afresh. Because one of the things that also happens is when you're just starting out, sometimes you pick an idea that's close to your heart or looks cool, but may not necessarily make business sense. So with all those factors put in, it just felt that it's better to start over again in a domain that I can relate to more. One of the other problems in Muzibu was I'm not a musician myself. So after a while, I couldn't relate to their problems actually. And in support, it's been incredible because we use support by ourselves. And I wanted to get into a domain where at least I could relate to the target customers a lot more. So even though I wasn't from customer support, I could relate to business owners and small and medium companies. And so it made sense to just switch over.
Because your story is very close to, you might like this, Phil Libin, he's Evernote CEO.
Okay.
So even he started with his own services company, first services company, and then they've started a product, failed, and then they have started Evernote. So it's much closer.
Right.
The decision.
Yeah, I think a lot of entrepreneurs do that. I think Visual Website Optimizer is another one. Paras tried a couple of ideas. In fact, he had a music service as well. I don't remember the name, but it was there for a while. And so I think even in India, there are a lot of entrepreneurs who have done that actually. And I think they've had pretty good success that way.
Do you think it's important for someone who wants to start a startup to first work in a desk job, with an MNC, and then start a startup? I mean, do you need the experience? Or can you just, finish college and then go straight into a startup? This is because I'm a college grad almost, so I want to know.
Right. So obviously this answer will come with a disclaimer that, there are always exceptions to the rule. And so there are, like, for example, I think Practo is one company that came right out of college and then did really well in India. I don't know if you know about them. But typically what I've seen is it does help to have a few years of experience, but at least today you don't need to get that experience in an MNC necessarily. You can actually get it in a well-run startup, a startup with a certain amount of validation. So probably you don't want to join a startup that has no validation and you're not sure where the startup is headed. But as soon as you think there's enough validation, or you like the product story, or you like the founders, you can definitely work with startups, and they can teach you a lot more. Simply because in startups, you have to do work, and your work is always going to be used. Big companies have the luxury of just sitting on your work or just wasting your time. But in a startup, that luxury isn't there, thankfully. So you're always going to gain a lot more exposure. So yes, to answer your question, I think it's good to get some experience.
So hi Pratik, and to add a comment, and then you can probably add more to it. To start up, there is no right time, but what I believe is the research that goes into starting up. So whether you're out of college, or whether you work for an MNC, whatever that means, or you work for any company, as long as you're doing good work and you find a problem you can solve, and you validate it by talking to people, then you can start up. And then the rest of the stuff like finances and team and stuff comes through. So Pratik, it'll be pretty interesting to see how you started about the idea about Support B, why you thought there was a gap, when did you realize that this could actually potentially take off, and finally, competition.
Right. Can these lights be a little bit dimmer? It's if it's okay. Yeah. So sorry. So your question was when did I start, and why did I think it was a good idea?
So there must have been a time when you found there's a pain point and like, hey man, this is a cool idea. Then you did your research. Then you actually said, all right, I think there is some gap to be filled.
Right. Okay.
And finally, competition.
Right. So when I was coming out of Musaboo, actually in some ways that's the other lesson I've learned. It's always easy to learn in hindsight, right? To look back, and it's much easier to come up with lessons, life lessons. So take it with a pinch of salt. But one thing I realized was that after Musaboo, I was pretty, not really desperate, but I was in a rush. I was like, oh my God, man, I've been sitting for a whole 20 days without doing anything, 3 weeks. And so I was actively looking for ideas, and we had this idea about having a customer support tool before, because we tried to find one for Musaboo and we ended up using something, but it wasn't that great. So it was around that time that I came up with the idea. And so one of the first things I did was, and we had a few other ideas before that, so we tried validating those, and those didn't work with customers. So we would just put up a landing page and then try talking to people. One of the first things I did about when I came up with the Support B idea was I talked to Valerie from Balsamic. So Balsamic is a very popular company, I think most of you guys would know. And they were very, very well known for their customer support. So I reached out to Valerie, and then she was kind enough to come on a Skype call and talk to me about the idea. And we did this with a few other companies like Wufoo and Discuss. And actually a lot of those interviews are now online on our blog. And we have also written more about this process itself on our blog if you guys are interested in checking it out. And so in a month or month and a half, we knew that, okay, we could do this. And I think what Kobe said in the morning, that you wish it was at least that hard as you imagined it to be. In my case, it was definitely true. So I thought, okay, so I just need to pass an email and then I can get started. And that's it. Passing the email took me and Avinash joined me a little bit later. It took us a whole year or something, pretty much. And so we started coding, but getting the product out took us about a good 8 months or something in private beta, and that's where we continue.
Any more questions?